Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be looking at one of the more popular mini PCs on Amazon. It is the, I'm going to go with KAMRUI? I have no idea. It is that name, AK1 Plus. You can get this thing right now for $136. Regular price is $159. Either way, it is a pretty darn inexpensive mini PC, 12th gen Alder Lake N95. So this thing is not going to be like some gaming powerhouse, although we will be testing some of that a bit later. But I think for a certain subset of people that just need a simple, basic computer, this thing makes a ton of sense. Let's jump into the unboxing and a quick teardown, and then we'll get into reviewing the product itself. All right, so let's unbox this mini PC. The box itself, pretty light, not a whole lot going on there, so not a whole lot to talk about. Inside, this is the computer itself, and it is very, very small. We're going to set it aside for just a moment and make sure there's nothing else of interest in here. This is going to be our power supply, pretty basic barrel plug. Looks like we do have an HDMI in here. We have a handful of screws, which we'll probably talk about why you might need those here in just a little bit. This appears to be maybe like a mounting bracket of some sort. Maybe you can mount this to the back of a computer monitor. And then there's a user manual. Let's get this out of the way. And we'll look at the computer itself. I'm going to put my Pixel Fold down next to this so that you can kind of get an idea about the scale of this thing, probably where your air is coming in, ventilation. Here on the right side, power button, couple of USB ports, probably 2.0s, and then a standard USB-A port there. Another USB on the back, 2 HDMI, that's good to see. There is your DC in for your power supply. You have an Ethernet cable, Kensington lock, microphone / headphone combo port, and that is pretty much it. On the bottom though, this is actually really interesting to me. Maybe this is something that they do more on these mini PCs, I'm not entirely sure. But this is not actually the full bottom of this device. You can see the model number, 8 gigs of RAM, 256 storage, Alder Lake, I think it's a 12th gen N95. I believe that's what Alder Lake is. But what's underneath this is not the actual bottom of the device. If we unlock this, you can unplug it, and that's the actual bottom of the device. You may be wondering, what is this thing then? What's going on in this piece? Well, I can show you. Remove those screws really quickly. What you have here is a spot to mount in a hard drive. That's having a hard time focusing. There we go. So you could actually drop an additional hard drive in here, and that's going to expand your storage. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to, but it's there, and you can just leave this on the bottom if that's what you want to do. On the actual bottom, there are some screws underneath these little rubber feet, and you know what that means. We're gonna have to see if we can get in here. And with those screws out, man, it comes apart really, really easily, so that is great to see. Looks like we have an M.2 drive here, and there's actually an open port here for another SATA cable. I'm not really sure what you would do with that, but it is in fact there. I think that's also an extra fan header that's just kind of hanging out as well. I would imagine that this board is probably used in other form factors, and they just aren't using these for this particular form factor. Pretty basic setup though. There were 2 more screws there, and I believe this entire thing can lift out of here now, and there is our RAM. That's just an 8 gigabyte module of RAM, 2666 megahertz, and this is something you could swap out for sure pretty darn easily. DDR4 laptop RAM, no big deal there. All right, so let's put this thing back together now. All right, reassembly only took me maybe about a minute, and we are fully back together. So I would say the upgradability on this thing is actually pretty good. The RAM and the storage can be upgraded, I'd say really, really quite quickly. So after I put it back together, I decided to set this computer up and begin my testing, and immediately a few things seemed a little bit weird. So first off, when I went through this setup, setting up Windows 11, it did not ask me to sign into my Microsoft account. I just did a local only installation. That may be something that you prefer, but it's just not how Windows 11 typically operates. So I thought, that's a little bit weird. I'll mention that in the rest of the review. But once I got the thing booted up, things got even stranger because Google Chrome was actually pre-installed and sitting on the desktop. That should not be there on a clean installation of Windows 11. So I fired up Chrome, and immediately I had a window pop up, and it was for a web page, or basically something called up searches. Now, I don't know a whole lot about up searches, but if I Google it, you will see that every single thing says this is a browser hijacker. It is malware. It is something that you're going to want to not have on your computer. And it was pre-installed on this computer, which is unfortunate. And I actually came across an article on Windows Central. They were talking about an Ace Magic mini computer, and they had the exact same thing happen. They booted it up and they found that Chrome was already pre-installed, which is a little bit weird. That should not be that way. But then when they dug into their Chrome default settings, they saw that the default search was Navi with us, and that was exactly the case on this device. I'm pointing to it. It's over here on the desk. And there's also something called up searches whenever you open up a new tab rather than Google. Now, Ace Magic actually responded to this and said that their previous supplier for bulk installations was independently adding pre-installed software without their authorization, and they have changed that provider now. And I am guessing that this company, KAMRUI, is what I'm going with, is probably in a very similar situation, but that does make me just a wee bit nervous. As I dug into this further, I came across this and I thought this was potentially very interesting and very explanatory. This company, Shenzhen, I'm not going to try to say the rest of that, also known as Mini PC Union, owns different brands: Ace Magic, Ace Magician, KAMRUI, and then these others. So the reason that the story from Windows Central sounds so familiar is because these two are made by the same company and the exact same thing is going on. So in that Windows Central article, they said that they changed their supplier, and what I imagine is happening is this computer was manufactured sitting in a warehouse somewhere before, hopefully, before that change was made. So it may be a little bit of a luck of the draw thing. I uninstalled Google Chrome. I ticked the box that said delete all of my data, my browsing data. I reinstall it again, and it seems as though it's gone. But my nervousness about this system persists. Now look, I want to be really clear about this. You can see for yourself, you can quickly Google up searches and Navi with us, and you can see what everybody says about both of them. Everybody pretty much says the same sorts of things. Now, I don't think that they are indeed viruses, not that true definition of the word virus. I think that these are spyware. These things are here to spy on what you're doing in your browser, and that is a major red flag. Pre-installing Chrome was done in order to get this spyware up and running more easily. Another red flag for me is the fact that the Windows 11 out-of-box experience was also altered such that you did not need to sign into a Microsoft account. So what I'm going to do later in this video, what I'm going to recommend to everybody, is if you buy one of these computers, you're probably going to want to just wipe it and reinstall Windows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly show you what the device looks like when you first set it up, and then I'm going to use this flash drive to absolutely wipe this thing's drive and reinstall Windows 11 fresh, and I will document how well that goes. Hopefully I don't need like a ton of drivers. Hopefully everything is downloaded straight from Windows Update and we're good to go. But with that being said, let's take a look at this thing here. We're just capturing it with a capture card. Close that down. This is pretty much what it looked like, right? And it's a pretty basic installation. Let's jump into our file browser though. You can see here it's a 237 gigabyte hard drive and you've got about 200 gigabytes of that free. I don't actually see anything particularly like suspicious about this thing either. Everything seems to be okay. I actually even ran a search for a virus using Windows antivirus and it didn't see anything. So it may be fine. It may have only been up searches and there may be nothing else suspicious about this device. But again, for me, it's a little bit weird. So I'm going to wipe it and I'm going to reinstall Windows. So if you bought this thing and you're going to sort of follow along and do this with me, you're going to do this reset. What I would tell you to do is first hit your little start key and we're going to type in CMD and we're going to run command prompt as an administrator, and then we're going to paste in this command. I'm going to put it in the description down below. What that's going to do is it's going to get you your Windows product key in case you need it in the reinstallation, which you probably will, you will now have that. I'm not going to hit enter because I'm not going to show you my product key. Now, to be clear, when I went through my setup process later on, I was not actually asked for that product key. So I think that it just sort of picked it up on its own, but it never hurts to have that just in case. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. The next thing we're going to do is hit that Windows Start key again, and we're going to type in recovery, and we're going to go down here to recovery options. And you should see an option here that says Advanced Startup. We're going to click on that now and hit Restart Now. What this is going to do is it's going to boot into this magical screen where I can boot from a USB drive. You could just reboot and try and find what key gets you into your BIOS and do things there. I'm not really going to bother with that. I'm just going to do it this way. Hopefully you know how to make a Windows installing flash drive. If you don't, there's tons of guides. It's super simple. I'll put a link to the page that gets you started on that down below as well. But for now, we're just going to assume that you know how to do that, and we're going to move ahead. I've already got my drive made, and I have it plugged in. So we're going to go with use a device, and that is the flash drive, and it should, in theory, boot directly into that drive here in just a moment. All right, beautiful. We are on the screen that we were waiting to see. So we're going to hit next, and we're going to click install now. We got to tick that box and hit next. Now we're going to do custom install of Windows, and these are all of the partitions we are going to delete because I don't trust any of them. So just one at a time, do what I'm doing. Click them, delete them, click them, delete them. They will be gone. There will be no possible chance that anything fishy is going on here. We only have the one option left. We're going to go ahead and click on next, and it will begin installing Windows onto that partition. All right, so we are now up and running. Luckily, all of this pretty much went as easily as you could have ever wanted it to. I didn't have any issues with Wi-Fi drivers or anything like that. Everything just kind of worked straight out of the box. I jumped into Windows Update and I updated everything fully, so we are totally good to go. I have installed Steam and have begun to install a game. The first thing that I want to show you, though, is the speed of the Wi-Fi. So I have a pretty fast connection here. It's actually, instead of 250 megabits per second, we are supposed to be getting around 1,000. So I'm going to go ahead and run this test again so you can sort of see it in real time. And I'm actually in the same room as my primary router. If I pull up my phone, it actually tends to get closer to like 814 megabits per second, whereas this thing seems to be topping out at in that 250 range. So again, I'm not like super impressed with the Wi-Fi performance on this device. Like, it's not terrible. It's the worst I've ever seen, but considering I'm sitting about a foot away and I'm like tripling it basically, I say not the most impressive networking performance that I have ever seen. Now, while we're just sitting here on this screen, I think that this will actually help kind of illustrate what kind of CPU performance you should be expecting out of this thing. Whenever I run this speed test, watch as the CPU's utilization actually maxes out from time to time. This is not a super fast processor, and again, just the fact that we're pushing our internet up to 280 megabits per second is almost maxing out this CPU. What I need to do now is stop doing the speed test. I'm going to finish downloading a couple of games, and we're going to see what kind of performance we have there to fully illustrate what kind of performance we're going to have in terms of just raw horsepower. And as I now am actually downloading and installing a game on Steam, I want you to notice here that it is absolutely flatlining this thing's CPU. So that is absolutely going to slow down that installation process through Steam. It is working as hard as it can to download and unpack that game at the same time. And that is for sure slowing things down. Let me see what kind of speed we're actually getting here as we're downloading. 163. So we're getting a little more than half what we actually should be getting, which was only about a quarter of what my internet's actually capable of. All right, so we fired up Rocket League 1920 by 1080. You can see the settings here, sort of a smattering of relatively high settings. And we're going to jump into an offline match. And we'll see if I'm going to have to lower any of these settings. And I'm thinking that I'm going to, because it looks like in the top left, I'm running at about 15 frames a second. Yeah, we are absolutely cruising. All right, so we've dropped everything down pretty heavily, and we are, you know, not quite hitting 30 FPS still, which tells me that, yeah, this is this is very laggy. Which tells me that we're going to have to drop the resolution down from 1080p probably down to 720p. Have we achieved 30 FPS? We have, and it looks rough, guys. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to look over at the actual monitor here for a second so I can actually control this without as much lag. Yep, ran out of boost. Yeah, this is not what I would call encouraging. In the interest of fairness, let's try one more game. This is, of course, Minecraft. We're going to jump into my realm. All right, so we are running around now, and I've got my overlay popped up in the top left-hand corner so you can see what's going on here. And we're, you know, sitting around, okay, dropping into the 20s from time to time. So I wouldn't consider this to be, like, great performance, but I think that it's probably playable. Let's jump into the settings here and see if we can potentially help this thing out a little bit. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to turn pretty much everything down, and then we're going to try and max the frame rate to 30 and see if we can, like, lock this bad boy at 30. And it seems like we're able to do that. So, again, not like the best performance in the world, but low-end stuff like Minecraft could probably get it done. Indie games and stuff like that. Just don't expect to be playing anything AAA. Now, I've actually seen in other people's videos this same processor, many PCs that are very similar to this, the Pro version, for instance, rather than this Plus version, running games quite a bit better. And I think the only real difference there is probably going to be in the RAM. So it might be worth either swapping out to a 16 gig module or just jumping up to the version that already has the 16 gig model if you plan on doing really any gaming at all with this thing. Let's do some normal stuff though, right? Let's fire up the Chrome browser. How long does it take to jump into that? And as you can see, not too bad. Not the fastest I've ever seen, but definitely not the slowest. Let's fire up YouTube. And again, similar kind of situation. First time I fired up YouTube on here, and I think it did all right. We'll fire up one of my own videos really quickly, which is in 4K, and it's doing fine, right? Like, I think for media consumption, it's going to do okay. For browsing the web, things like that, again, it's going to do fine. Maybe you want to use this thing as a multimedia machine, right? I think that you're going to be able to do that relatively well. We're going to talk about it in just a second, but of course you can mount this thing. I should probably pause this before I get hit with a copyright strike. You can mount this thing to the back of a monitor. You could easily hide it behind a television, get yourself a wireless mouse and keyboard combo like this thing from Logitech, and you could use it as a media device, and I think it's going to do just fine. 4K streams are going to be handled with no real trouble on this thing. So let me kind of talk about this thing for a second. I've mentioned it a couple times in this video. What this is basically a little adapter that will allow you to mount this computer to the back of a monitor or anything that has compatibility with a VESA mount. You've got these screws here, and these are going to actually screw into the back of the monitor. And then on the computer itself, you've got these little holes here, and it's just going to sit in there like that. And that's how it's going to live on the back of your computer. So that could potentially be pretty cool. If you've got a monitor with a VESA mount setup, which most of them have, you've basically got yourself a poor man's iMac. All right, so what's the verdict on this thing? I'm going to pull the Amazon listing back up again because I want you to really kind of focus on the fact that it's $136 right now. If you jump up to a model that is 16 gigs of RAM instead, that price is going to go up fairly significantly. Let me pull that page up. So there you go. Here's the model that I have that I'm reviewing. And then here's another model, which is $179. There's a $20 coupon. Regular price is $219 versus regular price of $159. That's a pretty significant difference. Now, I will say, from what I can tell, I haven't reviewed this myself, but what I can tell, this model does seem to be quite a bit faster because of that additional RAM. Now, could you potentially find 16 gig RAM module that you could pop in this thing for less than that difference in the price? Maybe, maybe not. With the way things are now, $20 coupon, I would just say go with this model 10 out of 10 times because it's going to be faster. and the price difference is not very significant at all. But for the model that I have here for $135.99, if you are going to be using it for multimedia or potentially as some sort of a server, something like that, I think it's going to do just fine for those sorts of things. Do not anticipate gaming on it unless it is indie titles, side scrollers, 2D stuff, maybe some old school emulation is going to be okay. Not a whole lot more than that though. And also be aware of the stuff I talked about in the beginning, the up searches and the weird search engine thing and Chrome being installed. Maybe it's as simple as uninstalling Chrome and deleting all of that data and then reinstalling Chrome, or maybe just using a different browser altogether. Maybe you end up wiping the thing like I did. Personally, I think this thing's going to live in my living room as a media center for my projector, and I think it handles that really quite well. One little side note that I forgot to mention. When I wiped it and reinstalled Windows fresh, I had 209 gigs free. What they shipped on it, I only had like 196 gigs free. So not sure what was taking up the rest of that space there. That was after I had Steam installed as well, mind you. So kind of a little bit strange. If that's a concern to you, I totally get why that would be the case. At any rate, guys, I'm going to drop an affiliate link into the description down below, which means if you click that link and then you make any purchase on Amazon for the next day or so, I will get commission from that. So keep that in mind. It's a great way to help support the channel. A big thanks to, I guess it's KAMRUI, that's what I'm going with, for sending this computer out for me to review. As with all of my full reviews, no money has changed hands for the production of the video, and they are seeing the video at the exact same time as you guys are. Yeah, so that's the KAMRUI AK1 Plus Mini PC. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, guys. I'll see you on the next one, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.